This morning on Morning Joe, Tom Homan, your border czar, lit fire a blowtorch and, well, basically left nothing standing there in that bastion of left-wing propaganda, and it was a beautiful thing. See, the team over at MSNBC or MS Now, are they MS Now yet? The team over there at Morning Joe, they're very angry at a 6-3 Supreme Court decision yesterday that says that ICE, the federal government, can in fact enforce immigration laws in the cities that they operate. That would be every city in America. Wherever they think criminal illegal aliens are, yes, they can enforce the law. Why did we need a Supreme Court decision to tell us that? And everything you need to know about the progressive left and so-called journalists in this country will be personified in this segment on Morning Joe, because they actually take exception to that. And more importantly, they take exception to law enforcement officers using basic investigative skills to find out if someone they suspect to be a criminal is in fact a criminal. I know it seems shocking, but here we go.
With this ruling, will the officials there, federal officials working for the Trump administration, National Guard and federal officers, will they be racially profiling? How will they approach the people they think might be migrants?
Well, first of all, it's a false narrative. We don't racially profile people to arrest them. I've been clear from in the soundbite, she just says 70% of people we arrest are not criminals. It's the opposite. Every morning I come to work, I go through 22 pages of data showing what's happened in the last 24 hours. Here are the facts. 70% of everybody we arrest is a criminal. But the left says we're not criminal enough. No, they're criminals. Who are the other 30%? There are national security threats. We've arrested thousands of national security threats. Most national security threats don't have a criminal history, but there's significant danger to this country. Who are the others? They're gang members with no criminal history. Or they're people who have final orders, who had due process at great taxpayer expense, were ordered removed by a federal judge and didn't leave. They're being arrested too. So this false narrative being pushed is a reason why there's over a 1,000% increase in the assault on ICE officers. So the Supreme Court agreed with us yesterday on how we do these operations. I said from day one, we don't arrest somebody or detain somebody without reasonable suspicion. And reasonable suspicion has a group of factors you must take into consideration. Racial profiling is not happening at all, and the Supreme Court has agreed with that.
Let's be clear here, though. If you take the narrative from the left and the three justices on the Supreme Court who are just absolute progressive maniacs who don't care about your safety or security, who think that the Constitution is actually a suicide pact, if you take the narrative from the team there on Morning Joe, you're not allowed to use somebody's physical appearance as part of the investigative process to determine whether someone is a wanted criminal or not. Like, for instance, you get a tip. You're working for ICE. You're in law enforcement. You get a tip that a bunch of criminal, illegal immigrant MS-13 gang members from El Salvador are doing drugs at the Home Depot parking lot down the street in Gardenia. So you show up, and if you don't stop every blonde-haired, blue-eyed white person from Scandinavia to check to see if they're from El Salvador, you're racially profiling. That's the thought process. That's wisdom. That's intelligence from the progressive left in America. If you give them power again, you know exactly what will happen. It's racially profiling to follow a tip that says Guatemalans are hanging out here, and you actually stop and talk to anybody who may appear to be Guatemalan. How dare you? How dare you? All right, fine. Let's go with more Tom Homan here. By the way, I don't know if you caught that. 70% of those that have been arrested are criminals, right? And that makes it sound like 30% aren't criminals. No, the other 30% were arrested because they're national security risks. And what's always left out of these reports is the fact that all of these people were let in without any encumbrance whatsoever by the previous administration. Don't forget that. We got here deliberately and for a reason. All right, take it away, Tom.
There are millions of people standing in line, taking their tests, doing the background investigation, paying the fees to be part of the greatest nation on earth. And the people who are doing things the right way are sitting on the back seat while we had millions of people come across the border in the Biden administration administration and cheated the system. People can call them asylum seekers all they want, but if you look at immigration court data, nearly 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border under Biden end up with an order of removal because they don't qualify for asylum. They're pushing themselves to the front of the line, and there are thousands of people in the world who actually are escaping fear and persecution from their homeland. They're sitting in the back seat while people violated laws, disrespected this nation. If you want to be a part of the greatest nation on earth, there's a right way and wrong way to do it. So if you're in the country illegally, you may not be a priority because we prioritize public safety threats and national security threats, but it's not okay to be in this country illegally.
That's right. And that message right there, plus the Supreme Court's decision yesterday, should actually increase the number of self-deportations in this country rapidly. They're running out of legal options. They've lost all across the board. At some point, they're going to realize that they shouldn't stay in this country because they're not supposed to be here. And if they ever want a chance to come back to America, for whatever altruistic reasons they may have, they need to go home and they need to start the process legally. So then Mika decides that she wants to jump into the fray. Okay, Mika, what you got to see for yourself?
I'd love some transparency as to why a lot of these people have been disappeared. You say you have data. We would love to see it. The American people should see this data.
Yeah, I'll let Tom Homan respond. But do you love the double standard here? Mika Brzezinski says we want transparency and we want data explaining about these people who have been disappeared. What does that even mean? Disappeared, right? I got a better question, Mika. You're a journalist. You've got the peacock there still in your corner at MSNBC. You guys have a pretty big budget. I'm sure you're motivated to find really bad, wrong, horrible things that Homan and ICE and Trump have done and Kristi Noem. Why don't you do some investigation and produce one innocent person who has been disappeared? Do you notice that? This is a narrative that they're just disappearing people. They're plucking people off the street and they're just taking them away, never to be seen from again. They're becoming Soylent Green. And yet they can't actually produce one example of that. There are 2 families who have claimed this in Southern California. One of them was found to be a fraud. She set the whole thing up to create a GoFundMe account and raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, which worked, by the way. And the other one was from a dude who had actually murdered his wife. And he claimed that ICE came and got her until the Ring camera from his neighbor's house showed him dragging a garbage bag full of his wife's remains across the sidewalk. Other than that, where are the disappearing going on right now, Mika? I'm sure that was English. Somewhere in there was English. All right, let's let Tom Homan answer now.
Well, here's the rhetoric again, right? You just meant disappeared. That is a ridiculous thing to say.
Why?
Because ICE is doing the same thing we've done for decades. But because of the last 4 years, ICE wasn't allowed to enforce the law. ICE was told to sit back, and you can't arrest an illegal alien for simply being here illegally. You got to wait till they commit a serious crime and get convicted of that crime. That's what Secretary Mayorkas' instructions were. And that's why you saw there's so much crime in this country coming from the illegal alien population, because there's no law enforcement. But we're doing the same thing right now that we did when I started back in 1984. ICE agents are enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. They're appropriated funding to enforce these laws. If you don't like what ICE is doing, then go protest Congress. However, to say we disappear people, no. We're arresting people that are in the country illegally and our public safety threat. We know exactly who we're going to arrest when we go look for them. We have a case file in front of us. We have all those facts. This is not disappearing people. This is a planned, targeted enforcement operation that we're doing. And comments like you just made is one of the reasons why these men and women are under threat every day. Not just the men and women in ICE, but their spouses and their children. They're not disappearing people. They're enforcing the law. And the data proves that 70% of these people are criminals.
Could we see that data?
Absolutely. I have no problem sharing any data from it. I read it every morning.
By the way, when was the last time Mika Brzezinski asked anyone from the Biden administration for the data to back up their claim that there was no crisis at the border, that our border is secure? There's no problem here. The laws are being followed. Where's the data? Where's the data? There was no data for any of that. She loves being lied to by her pals on the Democrat side of the aisle. But now she's claiming she wants the data on public arrest records, by the way. That's what data is. You want the data, then you go do a request for public arrest records and deportation records. It's all there. I'm sure you've got plenty of interns there that you shield from Joe Scarborough to do that kind of investigative work, but I overspeak. Let's get to, there was a moment in the show before Tom Homan came in. Let's do a quick rewind. Maura Healey, the governor of Massachusetts, she's charming. Where's her big, thick, black-rimmed glasses? She's out of costume. She was on talking about the danger of ICE coming into Boston and enforcing the law.
These are the people being picked up. And, imagine you're at home right now. What do? Right? Do you send your kid to school? Do you go to the grocery store? Do you go to the doctors? Because people are being picked up and targeted based on the color of their skin.
And at no point did Mika or Joe, as responsible members of the media, I couldn't even say it with a straight face, stop and say, hold on, Governor, you're going to scare people and terrify people when they shouldn't be scared. If someone is in this country legally, it doesn't matter what color their skin is. Listen, they may be detained or asked a question or two about their status, but if they're in the country legally, they have nothing to fear. Why are you making it sound like any random person could just get stopped and arrested and deported in this country? That's not true. That's not happening. But of course, Joe and Mika didn't do that because they want our country divided. They want people to be terrified. They continue to do their job the way they did it 10 years ago, before the rest of us woke up and started realizing exactly what was going on in this nation. Well, Tom Homan was sitting and waiting to come on the air. And for those of you who have never been backstage at a television studio or doing a remote hit, as we like to call them in the media, you can watch the program while you're waiting to go on. So here's Tom Homan. He's outside the White House, where there's a bunch of tents set up for live hits for the networks. He's standing there this morning watching the show, watching Governor Healey of Massachusetts. And he was pissed at what he heard, and he let Mika know.
I see on the show this morning you have Governor Healey talking about ICE doing enforcement operations at a church. Mm-hmm. False. Didn't happen.
They were parked there. They did not do an operation there. She said they were parked in a public space legally.
But to say that and to push that out there puts fear in the immigrant community. So let me tell you what's happening.
To do that puts fear in the community. Right. To park the ICE agent's vehicle
they're on a
near
public
a church.
Street.
They are on a public street. She said
they're on a public street,
sir.
waiting to respond to a criminal alien release pulled aside the road. Let me tell you, in the last couple of days, what's happened in Boston. They've arrested Victor Gomez Perez, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Guatemala, with charges of aggravated rape, assault and battery with dangerous weapon, indecent assault and battery on a victim 14 years or younger. They arrested Kaylee Espinosa, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Colombia, with charges of aggravated assault on a pregnant victim. They arrested Joshua Gonzalez, a 23-year-old criminal alien from Dominican Republic, with charges for trafficking heroin, morphine, opium, resisting police, disorderly conduct, and drug distribution. They also arrested Samuel Armando Barrera, a 20-year-old criminal illegal alien from Guatemala, pending charges for assault and battery on a child.
I'm going to let you finish there, Tom Homan, but I just want to jump in here real fast. Why didn't Mika Brzezinski or Joe Scarborough have that information and those questions to ask the governor of Massachusetts and say, I understand you're upset at ICE, you're upset at Tom Homan, you're upset at the bad orange man living in the White House for enforcing immigration law. Why aren't you upset that this is going on in the streets of your city of Boston? Why aren't you upset that the people that you're in charge of as the governor of Massachusetts are being terrorized, not by federal law enforcement, but by these criminal aliens that you're more than happy to welcome into your cities and into your towns in Massachusetts? Where's the outrage about that? But of course, no. Joe and Mika, that's not the business they're in. They're not in the business of holding elected officials accountable for their decisions or for their political rhetoric. They're not in the business of challenging every guest that they have on the show. They're in the propaganda business, not in the news business. And that sort of thing just wouldn't fit the narrative. But Tom Homan had those receipts, didn't he? And he's doing their job for him. All right, now I'm going to let you finish, Tom.
So Mayor Wu and Governor Healey, they ought to be calling ICE and thanking them for making their streets safer, for protecting their communities and taking these people off the street. They have turned a blind eye to this. They're sanctuary cities. Sanctuaries, cities and sanctuary states are sanctuaries for criminals. Give ICE access to the jail to arrest a bad guy in the jail rather than have to go in the community to find them. Because when you go in the community and find them, it puts ICE officers at greater risk. It puts the community at greater risk. It puts the alien at greater risk because anything can happen on the street arrest. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prioritize public safety threats. When you got governors and mayors who are releasing these public safety threats every day into the community, that causes the crime rate, and we've seen some terrible incidents in the last few days where innocent victims are murdered. This past year, I've seen innocent Americans raped and murdered by people who are not supposed to be here. So rather than going back and forth and say, well, ICE has got a car parked near a church, that is ridiculous. You're out there looking for people like this, exactly what they're doing.
Well, I would argue that actually that the ICE vehicle parked outside a Spanish mass is a frightening sight, given what has happened in this country. I also, with respect, sir, thank you for the information that you have shared on this show, but we would appreciate all of the information. All of it, all of the data that you say you have.
I've done this show several times. Every time on your show, I speak with integrity, I speak with honesty, and I speak with facts. The bottom line is, because of all this false narrative, and you using the term disappearing people,
well,
is
that's
disgusting.
What's happened. That happened to the group that was sent to El Salvador.
U.S. citizens get arrested every day. U.S. citizens get arrested by police every day. Are they being disappeared? No, their laws are being enforced. They're being arrested. They're being put in detention because they committed a criminal offense.
Not like what you're doing.
Not even
close.
We're enforcing the law and arresting people here in violation of law that are public safety threats. That's not disappearing people. That's enforcing the laws of this country and making this country safer.
God bless Tom Homan. And I know that we're all secretly saying the exact same little prayer. God bless Joe Scarborough for having to deal with Mrs. Scarborough on a minute-by-minute basis. That was brilliantly done. But understand what you just saw. Mika Brzezinski is more terrified of an ICE vehicle parked outside a church than she is the people who have been murdered and raped by the target of ICE's law enforcement activities. How did we get here? How in the hell did we get here where these smartasses in the media and their partners in the Democrat Party and the halls of academia who know so much more than you about what's really important with regard to safety and criminal justice. How did we get here where they get to make all of the decisions, making your life miserable if you don't have enough money to live behind a secured gate or wall or an armed building? Because see, they all have that benefit. You don't. How did we get here? Well, I actually have a little bit of insight into this, or at least I'll be able to share this insight with you. And shockingly, it comes from this morning's episode of Morning Joe, because I think somewhere in there with Joe Scarborough, there's still maybe, when he doesn't think about the big contract he gets from Comcast Universal and the big media play he's trying to do with his new ownership group so that he can make sure that he and his children and his much younger wife have a happy retirement. Somewhere deep down under all of that is the conservative Republican from the panhandle of Florida. And that guy emerged just a teeny bit today when debating criminal justice policies of the left. This guy is a Princeton professor who has some interesting views on crime and law enforcement. Watch Joe go.
Let's think about policing differently as we try to address an issue of safety, which every community deserves. Does that make sense?
It does.
Well,
Joe, take it.
Well, but the thing is, you talk about how cops on the streets won't make a difference. I will tell you that one poll after another has suggested otherwise. When you speak to Black Americans, when you speak to poorer Americans, there's a Washington Post poll that we've talked about quite a bit over the past several weeks since we talked about additional troops in Washington, D.C., and that is 91% of D.C. residents said that crime was a serious problem. The people that said crime was a very serious problem overwhelmingly were black residents. Those who said it was not a serious crime predominantly were white, rich residents. And the demographic who said that crime was the biggest problem were black women. I go back to 2020 when there were a lot of hipsters talking about defunding the police, a lot of political activists talking about defunding the police. You can find New York Times articles in real time about communities predominantly with people of color in some of the poorest and most dangerous parts of New York City. And their city councilmen and city councilwomen were saying, defund the police. What are you talking about? We need more police on the streets. We need more safety officers in our school. We need more police officers making sure our children and our mothers can walk to school and walk to work without being stopped by gang members. So I guess that's my question back to you. When you're speaking generally about this, are you speaking as an academic? Are you speaking as somebody who reflects these communities who say, we live in a dangerous city? I know rich white people in Georgetown may feel more comfortable, or in Northwest Washington may feel more comfortable, but in Southeast, we don't feel more comfortable. We want more cops.
No, Joe, I'm not just speaking as an academic. I'm speaking as a black man who has been reared in the United States with a deep-seated suspicion about whether or not police actually are engaged in protecting our communities, right? Having had to talk, right, from a young man, from a young boy. So there's not this relationship to the police that you're presupposing. And let me just say this, I think.
No, I'm not presupposing.
Let me just make this point.
Hold on, Eddie. Eddie, I'm not presupposing anything. I am giving you data. And by the way, are you living the same experience that you're talking about, that we've talked about on this show for 18 years with you and Gene Robinson and everybody else? But is your experience in Princeton the same as somebody's in Anacostia?
Of course not. Of course not. There are class differences. There are class differences that complicate.
The person in Anacostia.
It didn't go very well for either of them, by the way. Your Princeton University professor, who actually got called out on his elitism and the fact that he was out of touch with what's really going on the ground. But also, as you saw with Joe Scarborough, because you see, Joe can't win here for even saying what he said. Well, we all know how this ends. Joe Scarborough is a racist. But how did we get here, I ask again? Well, part of it is personified by this exchange. The man who will soon be the mayor of New York City, the most populous city in America, who has never had to live in any kind of circumstance where he wasn't privileged, where he didn't, in Uganda, live behind protected walls, in New York, where he lives in a secure building. He's never had a real job, but he knows better about how to solve the crime problem in New York City. Take a listen to Zoran Mamdani's plan.
Let me ask you about a bunch of different policies just to kind of get your thinking out there. If city council legislation to abolish the NYPD gang database were to pass, would you support and sign that?
I have supported that proposal. It's one that I've supported because of the vast dragnet has meant the inclusion of New Yorkers on the basis of whether they go out late, photos they put on social media. There's no question that we have to take gangs extremely seriously. And yet I find that a database that includes New Yorkers on such bases is one that doesn't actually do exactly that.
Okay. Yeah, so he's going to get rid of the New York City Police Department's crime database because it, amongst other factors, tracks people who are posting on social media in the wee hours of the morning in certain neighborhoods of New York, pictures of themselves with known gang members or flashing gang signs. Well, we can't have that. That's profiling. That's racist, obviously. Why should we use basic police tools and principles to go after the bad guys? But he has an even better idea. Forget about that. That's small potatoes. You see, New York has a problem with prison overcrowding right now. And most people would look at that and say, oh, because so many people are breaking the law and getting convicted, So maybe we should get a couple of more prisons built, because we haven't had a new prison built in many years and our population has grown and clearly there's more criminal activity. So let's accommodate those prisoners. No. How do you solve the problem of prison overcrowding? Zoran Mamdani, ladies and gentlemen.
The jail population of Rikers has increased since Eric Adams has come into office by more than 1,000 additional incarcerated New Yorkers. And what is quite staggering to me is that we know that we can reduce that jail population to less than 4,000. I mean, Vital City had an article about a number of different proposals that could reduce it to 3,700. And some of this also just has to look at the average stay on Rikers in the 90s was 50 days. Now it's more than 100. There are more than 1,500 people on Rikers who have been held there for more than a year. So I do think many of the reforms that have to be made are also reforms around the court system and ensuring that people are actually having speedy.
So he's very concerned about the 4,000 plus criminals who are in Rikers Island prison right now, serving out their term after being convicted of crimes. In a city, by the way, with a DA that was paid for by Soros, so the only people he really wants to convict are Donald Trump and Republicans. But still, somehow they were able to convict a handful more, bringing the prison population up to 4,000 plus. He's not worried about the, 8-9 million New Yorkers who live or work or commute in New York having to deal with this criminal element. No. His main focus are the criminals who have been convicted of crime. But did you notice the euphemism he learned? I don't want you to miss this. We have to watch it again. It's real short.
The jail population of Rikers has increased since Eric Adams has come into office by more than 1,000 additional incarcerated New Yorkers.
Incarcerated New Yorkers. Rikers Island has increased by about 1,000 incarcerated New Yorkers. They're prisoners. They're criminals. They're criminals. No, they're just incarcerated New Yorkers. Okay, I've asked the rhetorical question, how did we get here? That's how we got here. That right there is how we got here. And unless the people of New York or the people of DC or Chicago or Los Angeles or San Francisco or any other major city led by morons like that, intellectual, moral idiots, unless they do something and change quickly, it's just going to get worse before it gets better.